with this short clip is to take you through some of the development of what are our initial spider diagrams. This project is for a project that I'm doing with St Vincent's Hospital, and this is basically working out where my research is and trying to figure out what it is that I'm actually going to write about, because part of the expectation for my research is that I produce a journal paper or an essay, not dissimilar to what you're doing. So with this image here, so this is just a quick note that I've put into my notebook, trying to figure out some of the complications of the very large body of work that I have. So here I have one of the things that I need to do, because I'm an architect, is put together a briefing document. However, the project itself has a very difficult set of complications because we have very complex working systems. So I'm working with scientists and with people in the medical field about how they might design a space so that it invites or makes collaboration easier. But the other problem we have is we have very strict occupational health and safety issues. So the very flexible nature of the spaces that we're trying to design are also impeded by the strictness of occupational health and safety. The other thing, so then also we have the desire for innovation and collaboration. So one of the things when I was starting to build this research was to actually try and figure out what it is that I'm doing. Now this program I use is MindMap. I use this because I use visual aids a lot in trying to sort out data. If you're a visual person, then that's probably a really good way of sorting things out, so that you make, when you're starting to resolve problems and issues, whether it's writing an essay or figuring out background information for the work that you might be doing something visual because you're visual is probably easier. If you're more mathematically inclined, then you might want to do something different. Okay, so with this I've got the actual design. So I've got my practice that's looking after the architecture. I have someone who is a mechanical and electrical engineer. So that becomes a really important thing because some of the laboratories that are part of this have very specific requirements in terms of air handling and the temperature and humidity, because we've also got 3D printing in there. We have a laboratory expert, that's someone who actually designs laboratories and they understand the whole occupational health and safety issues. And then we have a quantity surveyor. This is someone who actually measures the building in terms of costings. There's a whole new map on all the different partners. This is, when we're designing buildings, often it's, particularly with married couples or couples in general, if they have two different ideas, it becomes a very interesting way of putting a brief together. In this case, we have 5 different universities, and so it's interesting. Anyway, so this is the research component, the area that I'm looking at. So when I start to expand this, I can start to look at one of the important things that they want is a project innovation studio. And so my secondary research is looking at world's best practice. And so then I start to look at what's in Europe, the States, in Asia, and I spent some time in Singapore having a look at some of these different laboratories and how they worked. There are others that have a global network. And so if I expand this, we can see things like the Alto Design Factory. So we also have something like that here at Swinburne, if I expand this out further. And so we have Melbourne, Shanghai, Tongji, Santiago, Helsinki, Geneva, Seoul, and Riga. Then we have some laboratories that are in Australia. So I can start to, have a look at what has been done elsewhere. Now this is I'm still building the research in this, so there are still other places that I need to look at. But some of the things I've identified is that there are common architects who have worked in this area. So it becomes sort of this enormous map of, there's all of this stuff available, but it's a matter of then sort of figuring out where do I actually start? Because I have this enormous body of information. Now, is this going to expand for me? Whoa, okay. So what I decided to do is I went to Biopolis and I spoke to some research architects there. So what I'm actually going to do, first of all, is just to do a case study and have a look at how Biopolis, which is this quite amazing, it's not like a university campus, but it's very close to it, which looks at different, has a whole lot of different laboratories. There's some industry laboratories there, but it is basically, they're establishing themselves as a medical research hub. So what I'm going to do is start to put all of these things away, because these will be separate things, separate essays and pieces of research in themselves. All I need to do is just look at one particular aspect. I know that within the context of everything else, where this sits. So Biopolis Singapore is one of many. However, I'm just going to look at this one. Otherwise, I'd be writing an encyclopedia. So I can get rid of those. Okay. So I'm going to actually look at the one that I went to was, which one was it? Proteus. So it was one of the Zaha Hadid's first projects. So all I'm really doing is looking at this. And so I can have a look at, let's have a look at this one. So all I need to do is start to write about just that one case study. So rather than be worried that I'm just going to look at an aspect, it's understanding where this sits in terms of the whole project. Now these are, pardon my incredibly slow computer, are more diagrammatic sketches about what the site looks like. And so the reality is something that's quite different. But in terms of the research, I'm just looking at this one component. So I have this massive amount of information, but it's just that one piece that I'm looking at. If I start to look at Biopolis Singapore, then I'm finding that I have to write about 5 different pages. Now that's fine if I'm doing my master's thesis on Biopolis, but I'm writing a short 5,000 word essay. And so it's really just looking at maybe phase 1, but then maybe even just how the laboratories in this area work. So we need to understand where everything sits within the context of everything else. Understanding why I'm looking at this in order to be able to answer this. So I'm looking at existing laboratories and how they work, and in terms of the planning and the function, in order to be able to inform what this design is. So I'm talking to people here about, so this is my primary research, where I'm talking to the people who use the space and what the most effective use of space is, to be able to, after doing my secondary research, to inform what will be the outcome of my design. So what you're looking at in terms of your research is having a look at what your initial project is, doing some secondary research to be able to establish this is what's existing. Then from that to be able to look at one particular aspect, and then to be able to talk to people about what they think and feel about a particular idea in order to be able to make your idea better. So the outcome for this is that I really would like to be able to talk to people who use space to understand how to make collaboration the focus of the area that they're working in, so that this becomes better here. So this is my secondary research, my primary research, and then this is how I present